These week 3 NFL picks for Sunday are going to make you very uncomfortable, but those, and I'm looking at them right now, are often the best ones to take, and I have 5 that are going to make you squirm. How about this? Smash that like button if you cashed on the Jets -6 from Thursday Night Football or the Falcons +6.5 from Monday Night Football on this channel. Last 2 videos. If you're stumbling onto this page for the first time, welcome. My name is Peter Appel, and this channel is going to be the home for all of my NFL picks moving forward this season, next season, for the rest of our lives. So hit that subscribe button if you're into that sort of thing. I would also greatly appreciate if you like the video before we get started, and I'd love to hear your thoughts about each pick in the comment section below. And what are you taking for week 3? I'll respond to all of them just like I've done on every video so far. And just a reminder that this channel is sponsored by BetMGM. It is the perfect time to use promo code JustGridiron for a first bet offer up to $1,500. Deposit at least $10, and if you lose your first wager on BetMGM after using code JustGridiron, you will get it back up to $1,500 in bonus bets. However, gambling problem? Call or text 1-800-GAMBLER. Must be 21 years or older, and terms and conditions apply. Let's get straight into my 5 favorite picks for week 3, and we start in Seattle as the Dolphins take on the Seahawks. Let's assess this situation. The look-ahead line for this game was Dolphins -2, and now with Skylar Thompson replacing Tua Tagovailoa, this has moved to Dolphins +6, but then it is settled back down to 4.5. So think to yourself quickly, is Tua worthy of a 6.5-point adjustment against the spread? The same Tua that threw 2 picks against the Bills last week before his injury. Still, you have to consider that the Dolphins have had 10 days to curate this offense to Skylar Thompson's strengths, and the Seahawks are coming off an overtime win against the Patriots. In Thompson's first start, with 10 days to prepare, with so many weapons at his disposal, I cannot drop this spread more than 4 points from the look ahead. So we got value on the Fins. Let's quickly revisit Skylar Thompson's last start, because the name Skylar Thompson to some can promote very bad thoughts. Most notably, his last playoff game against the Buffalo Bills on the road. It wasn't exactly the best spot for Skylar Thompson, who was a 7th-round rookie making his first playoff start. Thompson went 18 for 45 for 220 yards, a touchdown, and 2 interceptions. The stat line was very ugly, but the Dolphins' O-line was completely decimated in that game, and Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, both had multiple drops that made Thompson's day look a lot worse. It's also important to note that the Bills' defense he was going up against in that game was elite. They were 7th in EPA per play, and the Bills in general own the Dolphins. It gets a lot easier in a matchup like this, because what have the Seahawks done so far? They won 26-20 against the lowly Broncos in Bo Nix's first career start in Seattle with a full offseason to prepare. They won by 3 in overtime against Jacoby Brissett and the New England Patriots. And you could easily argue they should have lost that game. So let's not pretend that Skylar Thompson is going into some really tough situation. The Seahawks are also going to be without Kenneth Walker, who is still recovering from an oblique injury. That's going to be a huge problem for the Seahawks offense, as the Dolphins currently rank 6th in EPA per play against the rush, and should be able to shut down Zach Charbonnet, who only averaged 2.7 yards per carry last week against an inferior Patriots run defense. I think this is going to set up a lot of opportunities for the Dolphins to bring a lot of pressure on Geno, make him really uncomfortable. So far this season, Geno Smith is graded out as the 10th best passer by EPA per play when not pressured. So when he is, not nearly as great. So it'll be paramount for the Dolphins to make Geno uncomfortable in the pocket. On the flip side, the Seahawks let the Patriots control this game on the ground last weekend. They ran for 185 yards. The Dolphins should be able to get Devon Achane going and set up manageable third downs and a lot of play action opportunities. Skylar Thompson's best trait is making plays outside of the pocket, and I would expect McDaniel to lean on Thompson's strengths in this matchup. The Seahawks defense ranks out kind of well on paper, ranking 7th in EPA per play, but when it's against the Broncos and the Patriots, and the Patriots scored 20 and the Broncos scored 20, it's not that impressive to me, and I'm not putting a lot of stock into that. This bet really comes down to an overreaction in the market. Skylar Thompson is a viable backup quarterback, and whether you believe in him or not, the Dolphins do. Skylar Thompson and Mike White, to get the backup job, one of them had to win, and Mike McDaniel chose Skylar Thompson. Giving the Dolphins more than 4 points in this matchup is far too many, and it would not surprise me at all if the Dolphins pulled off the upset against Seattle. The Dolphins are a real football team with real playoff hopes, unlike the Patriots and the Broncos. Taking week 3 road underdogs that are 0-2 against the spread so far and are then underdogs of 3 or more points in week 3, wildly profitable. They've gone 118, 54, and 1, hitting at a 68.6% rate for a 32% ROI. If you take the money line for these teams, they hit at a 40% rate, which doesn't sound all that great, but the ROI is 25% because those underdog money lines tend to be a lot fatter when you're an underdog of 3 or more. And that system makes a lot of sense, right? Think about it. You haven't covered in 2 straight games, and now you're an underdog of 3 or more. So the market has completely sent you to the wayside. We know about betting on the NFL. That's why those teams in this situation, when everybody has left them for dead, we come up and pick up the scraps. The Seahawks are coming off an overtime win and then have to travel across the country. We already talked about how overtime games, the next game, those teams do not do so well. 44% cover rate for teams like the Seahawks. The Dolphins, on the flip side, 10 days to prepare for this one. I think they cover and they win outright. And let's not pretend that backup quarterbacks are some plague. Malik Willis won in week 2. Justin Fields won in week 1. So backup quarterbacks are now 2-0 straight up and 2-0 against the spread. Give me the Dolphins plus 4.5 at minus 105 and a half unit on Dolphins to pull the outright upset plus 180. Let's get to pick number 2. We're going to stay uncomfortable for pick number 2. We're traveling to Raymond James Stadium in Tampa Bay for the Broncos and the Buccaneers. This line opened at 3.5 and has crept out to plus 7. With the Buccaneers starting the season 2-0, even more telling that the Commanders were plus 4 underdogs to the Bucs in week 1. Look at how much this market has changed. That line would likely be plus 8 or plus 9 now. Are we really upgrading the Bucs after 2 weeks of data points like this? The Bucs offense under Baker Mayfield and new offensive coordinator Liam Cohn looked incredible in week 1. Put up 37 points. Can't believe I'm reading that correctly against the Commanders. I mean, we did take the over. I didn't expect 37 though. Who, now that I think about it, and the reason we took that over, the Commanders are likely the worst defense in the entire league. The Bucs in week 2, did they replicate that success on offense? Not really. They scored 20 points against the Lions and finished the week 16th in EPA per play on offense. Baker Mayfield threw for 185 and a tutty and a pick. Looking at the Broncos defense, I think the Broncos defense is much closer to the Lions than it is the Commanders. Now, the Broncos defense has held up really nicely through 2 games. They rank 10th in EPA per play. They've excelled at stopping the run, 8th lowest rushing EPA per play, and pressuring the quarterback, 26% pressure rate, which is above average. Last week, we saw the impact that pressuring Baker Mayfield can have when the Lions, Aiden Hutchinson, sacked Mayfield 5 times. The Buccaneers defense is kind of the exact spark that the Broncos, I think, need. Through 2 games, the Buccaneers ranked 21st in EPA per play, and despite holding the Lions to just 16 points last week, they gave up 463 yards to the Lions. The Lions just could not convert in the red zone at all, and they made a lot of stupid plays. The Bucs defense has been giving up a lot of easy yards through the air, conceding a 50% success rate on dropbacks, and they've ranked second to last in EPA per rush attempt. It's also not a healthy defense, as Clyde Cansey, who has 4 sacks already, and safety Antoine Winfield Jr., not going to play, banged up, injured for this game. Bo Nix, I know he's not very good. We took him in a teaser leg last week, and it barely hit. But Bo Nix, this is a defense that he should be able to move the ball against. It's a perfect recipe for him, who is at his best when the run game is flowing and he can complete these high percentage passes with ease. This is not going to be the Pittsburgh Steelers defense that he's facing that held the Broncos to just 6 points last week. Fading 2-0 favorites in general in week 3 throughout the history of the NFL, 56% hit rate. And there are multiple systems at 58% or above on week 3 road dogs without an ATS win. This is the peak of the market for the Buccaneers, and it seems to be the bottom of the market for the Denver Broncos. That's where we come in and scoop up the scraps. Too many points. Broncos +7 against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And I'm not quite sprinkling on an outright win, but I'll just say this. The systems back it up, and I wouldn't be too surprised. Pick number 3, we're traveling down to Cleveland as the Cleveland Browns take on the New York Giants. Don't worry, my next pick is going to be a little bit more fun, but this is still downright disgusting. Let's talk, because I'm going to take the Giants +7. I'm just telling you right out of the gate. And you're probably thinking to yourself, Peter, the Giants? The Giants? How about Deshaun Watson laying 7 against anyone, anywhere? He's one of the worst quarterbacks in the league and has no business laying 7 against anybody. Looking at the quarterbacks that have played at least 300 snaps from 2023 to 2024, Deshaun Watson ranks 29th out of 34 QBs in EPA per play and 25th out of 34 QBs in completion percentage over expectation. That puts him in the same company as guys like Kenny Pickett, Desmond Ridder, Aiden O'Connell, Josh Dobbs, Sam Howell. None of these guys are currently starting quarterbacks in the league. And Deshaun Watson, if he wasn't paid all that money, would not be a starting quarterback in this league. Watson's biggest struggle is that he just holds onto the ball for what seems like an hour. Watson has been sacked 3 or more times in 5 of his 7 games across 2023 and 2024, and his average time to throw the ball is 3.01 seconds, which is the 4th longest of any quarterback. Watson also isn't making any big plays with the extra time holding the ball either. His average air yards on completion is 3.7 yards, 5th lowest among 32 quarterbacks. 2020 Deshaun Watson, just to put it in perspective, when he was awesome, 7.3 yards per completion, which was the 3rd highest in the league. This is a really bad quarterback. And now the Giants defense ranks in the bottom 3rd of every defensive metric so far. But they've played pretty good offenses. I think we can all agree the Commanders' defense is terrible, but their offense isn't too bad. I think we can all agree the Vikings, they have a pretty good offense as well. The Giants have also excelled at stopping teams in the red zone. They've allowed just 2 touchdowns on 8 red zone trips and held the Commanders to 7 field goals just a week ago. The Browns came into this game with the 4th lowest EPA per play and will be much more manageable of an offense for this Giants team, who have successfully gotten pressure on opposing quarterbacks so far. And it goes even further. Jedrick Willis and Jack Conklin are both questionable to suit up. So the Browns' ability on the offensive line is also very questionable. Kayvon Thibodeau is healthy for this one, and Brian Burns, I think, is just due for a really good game. They've been solid at getting pressure, like I said. They're tied with the Texans for a 25% pressure rate. They should be able to make Watson's life really difficult. So I think that the Browns' offense is going to really struggle. But I know all of us are still thinking, Peter, you haven't told us how the Giants are going to score in this game against this elite, and I put it in quotes, elite Browns defense. This elite Browns defense is 11th in EPA per play. Like the Broncos, we just talked about, they're 10th in EPA per play. And who have the Browns faced? The Jaguars, the Cowboys. Pretty good, right? But here's the thing. They ranked 24th in rush EPA per play. So the Giants theoretically should be able to run the ball effectively, as Singletary has looked like a totally competent running back so far. Daniel Jones is also an excellent runner, and they were below average last year. They're below average this year in slowing quarterbacks on the ground. So I think that this offense is going to run through the ground on Devin Singletary, but also using Daniel Jones's legs, which I think will open up enough passing lanes in order for Daniel Jones to just be okay. Because we have to remember, Deshaun Watson is terrible. I cannot bet on Deshaun Watson to win with margin. And why we don't want to bet on the Giants, it's precisely why it's the right side historically. The same system that applies for those Dolphins, for those Broncos, holds here for the New York Giants. But when a team is 0-2 ATS and straight up, like the Giants are, 64-43, 60% hit rate in week 3. Hold your nose and bet the G-men. Let's get to pick number 4. Technically, this is pick number 5, as I gave you 2 picks in that Dolphins game, 1 pick in the Broncos game, 1 pick in the Giants game. And we're going to end by taking a look at one of the most fascinating markets that there's been, the huge line move. Saints Eagles. The biggest line move after week 2 was the Saints. They were a 3.5-point underdog, the preseason look ahead to the Eagles. Now, 3-point favorite. I understand why. The Saints have been the best team in the NFL through 2 weeks, and the Eagles are coming off a heartbreaking loss on primetime. However, just because I can understand the move does not mean I agree with it. And I will say this. Our big ticket under this season is on the New Orleans Saints under 7.5 wins. And it's going about as poorly as a bet can look through 2 weeks. Right now, they rank number 1 in EPA per play on offense, number 2 in defense. The offensive line has held up much better than I thought, and the defense has forced 5 turnovers in 2 games. I have definitely upgraded the Saints in my power rankings. But let's look at the Eagles. They were outgained in Brazil against the Packers. But honestly, and I talked about this in a previous video, it's hard for me to take a lot from that game. They did beat a good Packers team with Jordan Love, but both teams were kind of dealing with lousy field conditions in a new country for their first game. I'll give the Eagles some credit for winning, getting outgained. It doesn't really matter. My opinion on them didn't really change. In the second game, we took the Falcons plus 6.5. Eagles controlled time of possession beautifully. They dominated in that aspect. And if Saquon catches that pass at the end, we're likely looking at an Eagles 6-point win. And this line does not nearly move as much as it did. Instead, Kirk Cousins leads a drive, beats the Eagles at the end of the game, and then the line moved even farther. That's my issue here. The market overreacted to the Eagles, not to the Saints. The Saints deserve to be upgraded in everybody's power rankings. But now suddenly the Eagles are a bad team. It's just too big of a move with 2 weeks of data to work with. And the move up is simply too high. Now, I know the Eagles are going to be without A.J. Brown, which proved to be a really tough loss for Philly. He's a difference maker, especially in that offense. However, with another week to prepare, knowing that he's out, I do have faith that Kellen Moore, offensive coordinator for Philly, will scheme up something better than targeting Britton Covey 6 times. Knowing Brown's importance, I can make the Saints a -1 favorite in this game, not -3. Are we totally sure also? Are we totally sure that the Saints are this amazing? Remember, the Saints were a 4-point favorite against the Panthers in week 1. We saw how horrific that team is. So, do we put a lot of stock into that win when the Saints had an entire offseason to prepare for the horrible Panthers? Now, the Dallas win, certainly imposing. But we know who the Cowboys are. With a lead, they can't be beat, right? They're too explosive. When they get down in the game, they're terrible from a deficit. Those same Cowboys, who this is such an amazing win, were 2.5-point underdogs to the Browns in week 1, 2 weeks ago. If we go by preseason projections, I can make a case for the Eagles that would make your head spin. It would make you want to take the Eagles for 100 units. Based on what's happened for the first 2 weeks, I could give you such a good spin on the Saints. It's going to have you make you think Saints should be way bigger favorites. You can spin a narrative on either side. Here's what we know. Fading 2-0 favorites are 59 and 47. When a team is a favorite and moves to the underdog, taking those teams are 105 and 77. Dennis Allen off a win is 6, 16, and 2 against the spread. Derek Carr, and this is from Action Network, it's from their Bet Labs database, facing a defense allowing 21 points per game or more, he's 35 and 58, 36% against the spread. Again, versus defense that averaged 21 points per game allowed or more. So he hasn't been good against quote unquote bad defenses. And over the last 20 years in Action Labs database, Action Network's Bet Labs database, they have 266 QBs in there. Derek Carr, least profitable in that spot. The money line opened at -180. You could take the 3 points if you want. But I feel like this is going to be one of those games where the Saints either continue to prove that they are juggernauts or they get beaten outright. The value is on the money line, and I'm taking it. Eagles plus 130. And we also have another data point that tells me that the Eagles are the right side. I've partnered with Rithmm. It's a new app that uses AI and data modeling to predict props and game outcomes. Their model really likes the Eagles, like really likes them. Actually still makes them a 3-point favorite. So go to the link in the description to access your 7-day free trial to Rithmm for more props and game predictions. Shout out Rithmm on our last Video, Thursday Night Football, they give us Demario Douglas over 21 and a half. I didn't even take it because the guy didn't have a target in week 2, but I brought it up as something that was showing value. He had 35 yards, got there easily. One of the only guys that Jacoby Brissett connected with all night. So Rhythm's on a heater, and I just genuinely love the Eagles in this spot. Now, as you can tell, this is a very gross card, but I feel like these are all the right sides for week 3. Let's stay hot after winning Monday night, winning Thursday night, and go 5-0 on Sunday. Why not us?